We're going to be joined now by ABC News military consultant Steve Ganyard, former fighter pilot, Pentagon official, and Aaron David Miller of the Woodrow Wilson Center. Spent most of his career negotiating with Israelis and Palestinians for both Republican and Democratic presidents. And Steve, let me begin with you. If Israel does decide to go in on the ground, what would this operation look like? How long would it last? I noted that Prime Minister Netanyahu told his cabinet this morning it could take time.
It could take time, George. Urban combat is the most dirty, nasty form of combat there is. It takes a long time. The casualties are high, on both the combatant side and the civilian side. I think the Israelis are going to do everything they can to stay out of an urban conflict and keep their troops out of Gaza.
And one of the reasons they've been able to hold off so far, for the most part, the remarkable success of that Iron Dome shooting down the Hamas rockets. Not a single Israeli killed so far.
Iron Dome really is remarkable. It consists of a very sophisticated radar that's able to detect the missile launches coming in towards Israel. It actually makes a determination whether those missiles, incoming missiles, are going to hit into populated areas. So it only launches on those missiles that are incoming into Israel that could perhaps hurt people. So I'm very hard-pressed to find an example in the history of warfare where a single weapon system, a defensive weapon system, has so neutralized an enemy's opponent. But one of the things we see here is that it's kept the civilian casualties low, so the political pressure on Netanyahu to invade Gaza is low. So in a sense, you could say that Iron Dome is preventing a broader conflict.
Civilian casualties in Israel low, but Aaron David Miller, the civilian casualties are mounting in Gaza, and the clock tends to tick there. The more civilian casualties in Gaza, the more pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to go for a ceasefire, not a ground war.
Oh, and on the Egyptians, who probably risk the most in allowing this to play out, because al-Sisi knows that more civilian casualties will produce reactions on the Egyptian street. The problem, George, is this. Effective mediation requires urgency, a mediator, and a deal. And frankly, right now, you don't have any of those things. Hamas and Israel are simply not done. There is no deal on the table, and the Egyptians seem reluctant. And they are the key party, because they have influence with Israel, good relations with the Israelis, not so great relations with Hamas, but they have influence, and they have a demonstrated track record. In 2012, they did this too. None of these elements are in place, and that's why the tragedy of this entire enterprise is likely to play out for a good while longer.
So it goes on, potentially it escalates. Is there anything useful the United States can do?
We have tremendous leverage with the Israelis, assuming we would be prepared to use it. The problem is our leverage with the Israelis depends on Hamas's capacity and willingness to de-escalate. And right now, there's no motivation on them to do that. They want a deal. They want political benefits. They went into this crisis weak. And in order to justify the destruction that the Israelis are doing and civilian casualties, they're going to have to figure out a way to climb down, but to gain something from this operation, and that is not clear. What that gain is right now and who's going to give it to them, not clear right now.
We've seen this before. We've seen an operation like this in 2009. We've seen a similar lower-scale operation in 2012. What's different this time?
The reality is, other than Iron Dome, I think Steve is absolutely right. It's a paradox. It both prevents a ground operation and creates additional political time and space for the Israelis not to conclude this quickly. But at the end of the day, George, I'm telling you, I can write the script on how this is going to end. Hamas is going to claim that it resisted the mighty IDF and probably will get a political and economic benefit. The Israelis will argue they've degraded Hamas's capacity. We will have bought ourselves perhaps another year or two, and we'll be back at the table at this exact same point within the next 2 to 3 years. That's the real tragedy, and a lot of innocent people, primarily in Gaza, are going to have to die as a consequence.
Aaron Miller, Steve Ganyard, thanks very much.